Hey man, if you got a beard or you growing a beard and you got patches missing in that shit, cut that shit off. That shit ain't meant for you to grow. That shit ugly. Nah, if you got a beard and it's growing.
3 people are dead. 1 man is responsible. He left no note, no public statement, no clear explanation. Only a trail of bullets and broken families. On the night of June 24th, 2024 in Florida, Javontee Brice moved from one city to another with a single mission: to kill. Within less than an hour, he executed 3 separate murders: his own mother at a motel, his cousin at a family cookout, and a woman connected to an ex-girlfriend. It wasn't random. Authorities later confirmed every victim was targeted. Each stop was premeditated. Brice was carrying out what detectives called a clear agenda. But who is Javontee Brice, and what triggered this violent spree? This wasn't his first encounter with the law. He had a record: prior domestic violence cases, 2 risk protection orders, no mental health issues. And still, he moved freely. His actions raised major questions. How did a man with multiple red flags still get access to weapons? Why were his threats earlier that same day ignored? Why didn't the system act when he first said, "I have to kill you"? This is not just a story of one man's deadly actions. It is a case study in failure by institutions, by enforcement, by policy.
Start this morning with a developing situation happening in Manatee County. 3 women are dead after a man went on a killing spree. It all started around 9 o'clock last night. It first started with a shooting at a Motel 6 on 67th Street Circle East in Bradenton. Deputies say when they got there, they found a 48-year-old woman dead. Deputies say witnesses told them the suspect, Javontee Brice, shot his mother and then left the area. And then later that night, deputies were sent to another shooting on 26th Street Court East in Palmetto. They say a 29-year-old woman had been shot and killed while sitting inside a parked SUV. Witnesses identified Brice as the shooter in that one as well. And while investigating both of those cases, deputies received information about another shooting, this one in Bradenton. Police learned the same suspect shot and killed a woman before leaving that area. Multiple law enforcement agencies tracked Brice to Hamilton County, where he was shot and killed by deputies after shooting at them. Manatee County homicide detectives learned that Brice was on his way to Georgia with the intent to kill another person. Multiple investigations are ongoing currently.
In this breakdown, we map the full timeline, reveal his criminal past, investigate the unanswered questions, and ask, how many more warning signs must be missed before change happens? Watch closely. You might recognize the patterns before it happens again. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. If you enjoy real crime stories that uncover the truth, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share real cases, spread awareness, and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Javontee Brice was 28 years old at the time. He carried out a series of calculated murders that would claim 3 lives in the space of under an hour. Born and raised in Florida, Brice had moved between counties over the years. He left behind no note, no formal statement, and no direct explanation. But his past was not clean. It was documented, violent, and filled with warning signs that were either ignored or left unresolved by the systems around him. Brice's name had surfaced before June 24th, 2024, but never like this. His criminal record was already a matter of public concern before he became a killer. Among the most serious charges were domestic battery incidents involving former partners. In one prior case, police records detail an instance of strangulation, a known red flag for future lethal domestic violence. Despite this, he was not under active surveillance or supervision. He was also the subject of 2 risk protection orders RPOs, one in 2021 and another in 2023. These orders, often called red flag laws, are designed to prevent individuals showing violent or unstable behavior from accessing firearms. In theory, These orders should have restricted him from buying, borrowing, or owning any guns. But on the night of June 24th, 2024, Javontee Brice had a firearm. This raises a direct question. If he was legally barred from owning a gun, how did he get one? What enforcement mechanisms failed? Were there gaps in tracking or reporting? Did someone knowingly supply him with a weapon? In addition to his criminal history, mental health issues were documented. Brice had previously attempted suicide on more than one occasion, as confirmed by family interviews and health records. Despite this, there is no evidence that he received long-term psychiatric care, nor is there indication that any mental health intervention was in place in the weeks leading up to the killings. If someone shows repeated signs of mental crisis, violence, and suicidal ideation, what steps can be taken before it turns deadly? And why weren't they taken in this case? Brice's first confirmed victim was his mother, 48-year-old Tidamisha Scott. She was staying at a Motel 6 in Bradenton, Florida. At approximately 9:15 p.m., Brice arrived at her room. Witnesses, identified later as family members, say he walked in, said, "I'm sorry," and then shot her 3 times at close range. Scott was described as a supportive figure in Brice's life. She had been close to her son and maintained communication with him despite his prior arrests and instability. There is no record of public conflict between them. This leads to a critical viewer question. Did she know her son's state of mind that day? If she did, why was she unprotected? If she didn't, what changed in Brice to lead him to kill her first? Her murder was not an act of rage in the heat of an argument. It was precise, deliberate, and witnessed. He left the motel quickly after the shooting. Roughly 30 minutes later, Brice appeared at a family cookout in Palmetto, where his cousin, 29-year-old Sequoia Brice, was present. According to multiple witnesses, Sequoia was walking to her car when Brice approached and shot her without provocation. Sequoia had no known conflict with Javontee. Police records and family interviews revealed no history of argument, rivalry, or past tension. Her killing, too, appeared planned. He did not fire indiscriminately into crowd. He walked directly up to her and fired, then left the area without confrontation. This raises further questions. Why target her? Was it an attempt to destroy those closest to him? Was she a symbolic link to the family he believed failed him? Or was it a psychological pattern, eliminating emotional witnesses? By 10:04 p.m., Brice had reached Bradenton, targeting a woman named Cheryl Carter, identified as a current partner of one of his ex-girlfriends. This victim is believed to be symbolic, not someone with whom he had any ongoing communication or direct dispute. She was connected only through romantic history. Brice either entered her home or intercepted her nearby, and she was fatally shot. Details about her final moments remain sealed, but police have stated that her killing followed the same pattern: quick, deliberate, and without apparent resistance. This act could be interpreted in many ways: as an attempt to exert control over a former partner through fear, as a revenge killing stemming from jealousy or perceived disrespect, or as a continuation of a larger mental breakdown driven by delusion. Was this third killing the endpoint of his plan, or was a message? Was he acting on revenge, delusion, or an inner logic only he understood? Each victim shared something in common: a personal connection to Brice. None were strangers. None were randomly selected. Authorities concluded that each murder was targeted. No collateral damage. No impulsive bursts. This was a methodical chain of events. 3 women. 3 levels of personal connection: mother, blood cousin, romantic rival. These relationships point to a troubling pattern seen in similar cases: intimate violence escalating to murder. This is not uncommon in mass killings involving family members. If a man has risk protection orders, a violent history, suicide attempts, and access to weapons, why isn't he actively monitored? If someone shows violent instability, why does it often take a tragedy before the system responds? Is the current structure of red flag laws enforceable or just symbolic? This story is about more than a man and his crimes. It's about what should have stopped him and didn't. This third murder confirmed a pattern. All 3 women, all connected to Brice personally, all killed within 49 minutes. Brice's movement between the 3 crime scenes shows clear intent, not impulse. Each location was known to him. The spacing of the attacks allowed for enough time to escape before first responders could arrive. There was no attempt to cover his tracks or conceal his identity. Each of the victims had a known relationship to Brice. His mother murdered first. His cousin murdered second. His ex-girlfriend's partner murdered third. This sequence suggests a form of targeted retaliation or ideological reasoning. Though no written or digital explanation has been recovered, authorities have not found any manifesto, video statement, or journal that details his motives. Brice was eventually killed in a shootout with law enforcement at 1:30 a.m. the following morning, but by then, the damage was done. How many signs must a person show before intervention becomes mandatory? Are current mental health laws effective in stopping imminent threats? What role should family, friends, and community members play when warning signs are visible? As soon as the third body was discovered on the night of June 24th, 2024, Florida law enforcement initiated a coordinated emergency response. By that time, authorities had connected the shootings in Bradenton and Palmetto, realizing they were all linked to one individual, 28-year-old Javontee Brice. A statewide BOLO, be on the lookout, was immediately issued, warning all jurisdictions across Florida and bordering states. The alert included Brice's name, physical description, the make and model of the vehicle he was likely driving, and a directive to consider him armed and extremely dangerous. Investigators already had evidence that Brice's killing spree wasn't random. The victims were personal: his mother, his cousin, and his ex-girlfriend's new partner. Based on testimony from surviving relatives and Brice's known history of violent behavior, police theorized he was headed toward Georgia to confront another former partner, a woman he had previously threatened and who had been subject to one of the 2 risk protection orders filed against him in earlier years. Law enforcement moved quickly to track his escape route. Using automated license plate readers installed on highways, toll booth activity, and traffic camera surveillance, they began to reconstruct his movement as he fled the crime scenes. From Bradenton, Florida, he was observed heading north via I-75. With every new camera capture, his location became more predictable. Shortly before 1:30 a.m. on June 25th, deputies in Hamilton County, located near Florida's northern border, were alerted to Brice's proximity. A black sedan matching the BOLO description was spotted on a stretch of I-75. Deputies coordinated to perform a high-risk traffic stop. When they boxed the vehicle in, Brice opened fire without warning. Deputies returned fire immediately, neutralizing the threat. Brice was pronounced dead at the scene. Inside the car with him was a woman. She was alive, unharmed, and removed from the vehicle for questioning. This immediately led to new questions. Who was this woman? Was she involved in the killings? Was she traveling with him willingly or under duress? Was she a hostage, a witness, or something else entirely? As of the latest updates, her identity has not been publicly released, and she has not been charged. Investigators are continuing to analyze her relationship with Brice and whether she provided aid or had knowledge of his plans. Following Brice's death, investigators began compiling and organizing evidence to understand the totality of what had occurred, and more importantly, why it happened. One of the most striking discoveries was the absence of any suicide note, manifesto, or digital trail that could clarify his motive. Despite the intimate nature of the killings and precision with which he moved between targets, Brice left behind no formal explanation. No confessional text, social media posts, or journal entries were found in initial forensic reviews. Law enforcement described the murders as part of a calculated agenda, but the motive behind it remains undetermined. One senior official stated, "He knew exactly who he wanted to kill, but we may never know what set him off." This created challenges for both law enforcement and the families of the victims. Without a stated motive, determining whether this was driven by personal revenge, mental instability, delusion, or calculated rage remains speculative. Another major unanswered question involves the firearm Brice used. He had been the subject of 2 prior risk protection orders, in 2021 and again in 2023. These orders legally barred him from possessing or purchasing firearms. Yet, during a spree, he was clearly armed and accurate. Authorities have not disclosed how the weapon was acquired, but they confirmed it was not registered to Brice. The origin of the firearm is still under investigation. including whether it was obtained illegally or through a straw purchase. As the investigation unfolded, a pattern became increasingly clear. Multiple systemic failures contributed to the fatal outcome. Brice had a history of domestic violence. At least 2 known incidents involved threats and physical aggression toward women. In one case, he was accused of strangulation, a behavior that is widely recognized as a major red flag for future lethal violence. Despite this, his charges were not escalated to felonies, which might have ensured longer supervision or mandated psychiatric evaluation. 2 separate risk protection orders, RPOs, had been filed in previous years. These orders are designed to temporarily remove weapons from individuals deemed a threat to themselves or others. But in Brice's case, these RPOs appear to have had little to no active enforcement. There is no evidence that law enforcement followed up to confirm whether Brice's firearms had been surrendered or blocked his access to new ones. Brice had also attempted suicide more than once. This was documented by both family members and previous healthcare interactions. However, no mental health hold was ever implemented under Florida's Baker Act, which could have mandated a psychiatric evaluation. One glaring issue exposed by this case is a lack of coordination between mental health systems, law enforcement agencies, and judicial oversight. Brice moved between counties, and with every new jurisdiction, existing warnings seemed to reset. There was no unified database or monitoring protocol that could have identified him as a high-risk individual across agencies. This case raises urgent questions about how threats are tracked and addressed in real time. Should there be a centralized, real-time database of individuals under active RPOs? Why is there no automatic firearm restriction enforced across county and state lines for individuals with violent or suicidal behavior? Are protection orders just paper documents, or should they trigger active monitoring systems? Was Brice allowed to slip through the cracks because systems failed to communicate? Would stricter follow-up on domestic violence charges and mental health crises have prevented these murders? The Javontee Brice case made headlines across Florida and beyond. Major outlets reported the facts. A man killed his mother, cousin, and an ex-girlfriend's partner within the span of 1 hour. He was later shot and killed during a police encounter in Hamilton County. The stories focus on the violence, the locations, and the rapid timeline of events. Most headlines highlighted the shock factor, labeling a triple homicide or family killing spree. What received far less attention was the system behind the man, the background failures that made the killings possible. Few media outlets explored how someone with a history of domestic violence, suicide attempts, and 2 risk protection orders could still obtain a weapon and carry out 3 murders. The conversation remained centered on the event itself, not the circumstances that enabled it. There was little national focus on the victims beyond their names. No major follow-ups explored their lives, their legacies, or how the surviving families were processing the tragedy. Media coverage treated them as passive casualties in a larger headline, not individuals with stories, careers, and communities. The motive remained unclear to the public. Authorities offered limited information. This vacuum led to online speculation. Social media platforms became filled with viral theories. Some blamed government conspiracy. Others claimed Brice was part of a secret gang vendetta. The lack of official narrative clarity gave rise to misinformation and confusion. Why did national media stop coverage after the initial report? Should mainstream outlets investigate systemic contributors more thoroughly in cases like this? Are viewers demanding surface-level coverage instead of deeper accountability? More than 70% of mass shootings in the United States involve some form of domestic or intimate partner violence. This case follows the pattern. All 3 of Brice's victims were women closely connected to him: his mother, his cousin, and the romantic partner of an ex-girlfriend. These are not random targets. They represent people who had personal ties, emotional impact, or perceived betrayal. Psychological profiling in similar cases often reveals common themes: control, rage, rejection, and power imbalance. The perpetrator feels either abandoned, disrespected, or no longer in control of key relationships. The response becomes violent and punitive. Javontee Brice had prior domestic violence charges. In one case, reports state he strangled a partner. Strangulation is considered one of the strongest red flags in domestic violence cases. Studies show that individuals who strangle their partners are 750% more likely to eventually commit homicide. Yet this history didn't trigger mandatory psychological evaluation. There were no long-term holds, forced treatment plans, or firearm restrictions effectively enforced. Behavioral patterns in cases like this are frequently overlooked. Isolation of partners, repeated threats, emotional instability, and sudden outbursts are all common. In Brice's case, there were visible signs of declining mental health and aggressive behavior weeks before the killings. No action was taken. Should a single strangulation charge lead to automatic mental health evaluation? Why are known predictors of homicide being ignored in legal procedures? What would it take for the justice system to treat these signs with the seriousness they warrant? Despite being the subject of 2 risk protection orders, RPOs, filed in 2021 and again in 2023, Brice still accessed a firearm. RPOs are part of Florida's red flag laws, which allow law enforcement to remove firearms from individuals deemed dangerous. These orders are court-issued and legally binding. In theory, Brice should not have had a gun, but enforcement of RPOs varies widely by county. There is no unified database accessible across all law enforcement jurisdictions in Florida. This leaves dangerous gaps in real-time updates, background checks, and enforcement logistics. One county may not know what another has flagged. There's also the issue of recovery. When an RPO is issued, it is not always followed by a firearm retrieval process. Some subjects voluntarily surrender weapons. Others are never followed up on. No one has confirmed whether Brice's previous firearms, if any, were ever recovered after the RPOs. The gun used in the murders has not been publicly traced. It is unclear whether it was acquired legally, borrowed, stolen, or purchased illegally. This creates another layer of vulnerability in firearm monitoring systems. Should Florida counties be required to report RPOs in a central statewide system? Should enforcement teams be formed specifically to retrieve weapons after an RPO? If a person is on record as suicidal and violent, why isn't their firearm access monitored constantly? All 3 victims in this case were women. This aligns with broader data. In domestic violence-related killings, women are most often the victims. In fact, when a gun is present in a domestic violence situation, women are 5 times more likely to be killed. Brice had previously made direct threats against women, including one ex-girlfriend earlier that same day. He told her, "I have to kill you." That warning was dismissed. No protective action was taken. Law enforcement was not called. There was no intervention. Patterns of violence against women are often considered private matters or family issues. This social framing makes it easy for perpetrators to escalate without scrutiny. Repeated threats, stalking, harassment, and violence are minimized until they become fatal. Mental health also plays a crucial role. Brice had reportedly attempted suicide at least twice. He had signs of paranoia and emotional instability. Still, no institutional mental health treatment plan was enforced. The risk was both personal and public, yet the response was non-existent. There is currently no law in Florida requiring immediate gun removal upon verbal threats of violence, unless the threat is acted upon. By then, it is often too late. How many victims never knew they were being stalked, monitored, or marked for harm? Should any verbal threat of violence trigger an immediate firearm retrieval and mental health evaluation? Why are public policy and law enforcement waiting for tragedy to act? In the wake of a brutal, tightly coordinated triple homicide that left Florida reeling, one question remains under intense scrutiny. Did Javontee Brice leave behind a digital trail? Investigators have combed through Brice's known social media accounts: Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and lesser-known platforms for signs of violent mindset or warning signals. The review revealed minimal activity in the weeks leading up to the killings. There were no public posts expressing anger, no cryptic messages that raised flags, and no visible threats. On the surface, Brice maintained a low digital profile. His account showed occasional photos, standard reposts, and basic updates, nothing to indicate that he was planning to kill 3 people in cold blood. But beneath the surface, investigators turned their attention to his messaging history, including private DMs, encrypted chats, and SMS communications. As of this report, that data has not been publicly disclosed. The FBI and local authorities confirmed that Brice's mobile phone and personal laptop were seized during the investigation. Forensic analysts are examining the devices to determine who he messaged in the days and hours before the killings, whether he coordinated the attacks using private messaging apps, if he left behind any written plans, notes, or digital manifestos saved offline or on cloud services. Authorities have not found any manifesto posted to public platforms. However, they have not ruled out the possibility that Brice may have used encrypted apps like Signal, Telegram, or Wickr to communicate or store instructions. So far, there is no evidence that anyone helped him plan or carry out the murders. But until the full contents of his devices are released or leaked, that conclusion remains inconclusive. At a final press briefing held by the Manatee County Sheriff's Office and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, officials outlined a conclusion of their field investigation. Javontee Brice was shot and killed by law enforcement during a shootout in Hamilton County. From a legal standpoint, the case is considered closed. The prime suspect is dead. There will be no prosecution or trial. However, investigative work is ongoing behind the scenes. Interviews with family members and close associates continue, particularly with individuals who may have noticed signs of deterioration or threats prior to the event. Law enforcement confirmed that they are conducting follow-up interrogations with the woman who was in the vehicle with Brice during the final shootout. Her role remains unclear. Was she a hostage? Was she accompanying him willingly? Did she know what he had done? Authorities have not named her or released her status as a suspect or witness. In addition, portions of the case records have been sealed, citing ongoing reviews and the sensitive nature of the forensic evidence. Investigators are also working in tandem with federal agencies to trace the origin of the firearm Brice used, especially since he had been under 2 risk protection orders which should have prevented legal gun ownership. Despite official closure, several questions remain unanswered. Was anyone else aware of Brice's plan? Did he confide in anyone? Was there a pattern of escalation in private conversations? If so, did the recipient of that information report it? How did he travel so efficiently between murder scenes without being stopped? Brice committed 3 murders across separate cities in under 60 minutes. Was there GPS tracking? Did he use a burner phone or vehicle unfamiliar to law enforcement? What does the medical examiner say about Brice's mental state? Toxicology reports are pending. Was he under the influence? Did he suffer from psychosis or another diagnosable mental illness? Was this preventable? He was flagged for violent behavior. He had 2 risk protection orders. He had a prior domestic violence record and suicide attempts. Was there a point where law enforcement, mental health services, or his community could have intervened? The case reveals multiple system failures. Here are 4 key areas of reform under active discussion. An RPO should mean immediate firearm surrender and database tracking. In Brice's case, he still obtained and used a gun. Why wasn't enforcement immediate and continuous? Strangulation, threats of murder, prior abuse, all are clear predictors of homicide. Communities and law enforcement need better education on how to escalate these red flags to interventions. Agencies working in silos allowed Brice to slip through the cracks. A unified system connecting courts, hospitals, and law enforcement could prevent similar oversights in future cases. When someone says, "I'm going to kill you," it should not be dismissed as an emotional outburst. Such statements should trigger an immediate response. Educating the public on when and how to report threats could save lives. Javontee Brice's story is not an outlier. It is a reflection of what happens when multiple safety nets fail at once. From the ignored domestic violence warnings to the unenforced risk protection orders, every system designed to protect the public broke down. 3 people are dead. One of them was Brice's mother. Another was his cousin. The third had no known conflict with him, but was in a relationship with someone he once dated. There were warnings. There were opportunities to intervene. But none of them were taken seriously enough to prevent what happened. There will be no trial. There will be no official motive. But the consequences remain. This case now exists as a point of reference for law enforcement, lawmakers, and communities to rethink how they identify and neutralize a threat before lives are lost. Have you ever seen a post, a DM, or a message that felt off or threatening? Would you feel confident reporting that today? And if not, why? Do you trust the current system to protect the public from someone like Brice? The case is closed, but the warning signs it left behind are wide open. The question now is, what will we do differently next time? If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.